Good afternoon. It's Monday the 25th of June 2018, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me in the studio today, Patrick Henningsen, 21st Century Wire. Welcome to the programme, Patrick.
Thank you, Mike.
And we'll get straight on with it because over the weekend, Gavin Williamson, he likes making a fool of himself, doesn't he? So he seemed to be a bit jealous that the National Health Service was getting £20 billion. So he said, give me £20 billion now or else. And the allegation in the Sunday Mail yesterday was that he threatened that he would lead a rebellion of Conservative MPs against Theresa May to vote down the next budget if he didn't get his £20 billion. His £20 billion. I think I said 20 million there. But anyway, today, some friends of his, he apparently has some friends of his come out and said that really this is overreaction, didn't really happen. He didn't really threaten anybody. So a bit of backtracking perhaps, but you know, at the end of the day, what's this about? This is all about the upcoming NATO summit and the fact that at the NATO summit last year, Donald Trump had demanded that everybody steps up to the plate and puts at least 2% of GDP into defence. Now, the UK claims that it puts 2% of GDP into defence, but in fact they're now counting pension money in that. So it's not quite 2%, but he's demanding an extra £20 billion. Apparently he's going to meet Philip Hammond in the coming days and discuss this. So
he's drafting off the back of Donald Trump's comments. Is
that seems to be what's going on?
Well, so extorting people for money worked for the DUP, but in the words of Ronald Reagan, you never negotiate with terrorists. So I don't know if he's going to get that deal from Theresa May or not, Mike.
Just in time, apparently. Well, he's not actually there today, but in Brussels today, the European Union is discussing all things defence. Freddie Howe is there, who's the defence minister, and also Alan Duncan MP are there. It's in Luxembourg today for the Foreign Affairs and Defence Council meeting. Also, Boris Johnson will be there because all the foreign secretaries are all there as well. But this is all fantastic stuff. This is video that we're showing at the moment is an EU video, European Commission video, all talking about military Schengen.
Are they expecting a war or something?
That is how it looks, isn't it?
It looks like it.
Yes, yeah. but this is all about military Schengen. Okay, which is part and parcel of the Defence Union arrangements. But Defence Union absolutely on the cards here, if you'll excuse the pun. But let's have a look and see what Federica Mogherini had to say about it.
We have today a very intense agenda, even more than usual, because we'll start with a full morning of a joint meeting of defence and foreign ministers to prepare the European Council that, as you know, has defence and security on its agenda, and also in preparation for the NATO summit, where we'll strengthen and relaunch even more than we're doing now EU-NATO cooperation. I'll be happy to welcome again Secretary General Stoltenberg to prepare the NATO summit at Brussels, to look at the implementation of our cooperation measures and to prepare the summit. But most of all, with the defence and foreign ministers this morning, we'll look at the implementation of all our package on defence and security, from the permanent structured cooperation projects to the financial instruments we have proposed to put in place to sustain this level of ambition of the European defence. It's going to be a very dense and intense work that is testimony of a collective work Member States and all European institutions have been doing in this last year and a half, and that we will bring to the European Council later this week.
So, you know, if anybody's been watching this programme for any length of time, will know that this is exactly what we've been talking about some time. So we can tick the boxes here: permanent structured cooperation, military mobility, the military Schengen, initiatives, as they're describing it, around a framework for the future multi-annual financial framework. So this is the EU Treasury, single point control of the military EU-wide. Now, if anybody wants any additional background to this, we have an entire section on the UK Column website under the moniker of EU military unification. And if you click on the banner on the front page of the website, it'll take you to a timeline where we basically show how this policy has progressed since 1994. We could have gone back further than that, but that seemed like a reasonable starting point. And we're also showing here that this is a policy which the UK has been part and parcel of from the beginning, beginning with Tony Blair, but actually from before that as well. So, you know, all the various acronyms are in there, PESCO, CARD, all the rest of them.
It's a great resource, Mike, and a lot of people have used this for their own research.
Absolutely. So, you know, this, I think for quite a number of people that weren't really understanding what we were saying about this, when they saw the timeline and read through it, it makes it absolutely clear where this has been going and how long it's been running for. So do share that if you possibly can. But clearly, military unification right at the heart of everything, Brexit, and even including Brexit, and many people in the UK starting to recognise that this is right at the centre of the Brexit debate as well. Now, of course, military unification, not the only thing that Federica was talking about. She's looking pretty tired there, Patrick. I have to say, it looks like she's under quite a lot of pressure at the moment.
From this time last year, Mike, it looks like she's aged about 5-10 years or something. So she's either under tremendous stress, or maybe this is a very early morning press conference or something. I'm not sure, but this is not the Federica Mogherini, the confident EU High Representative with the bounce in her step 12 months ago, Mike.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, it wasn't that early in the morning, because I think it was 9 o'clock or so this morning that this press conference happened. Now, so they're also, aside from the defence meetings, they're also going to have foreign ministers meetings. They're talking about Yemen. They're going to be receiving a briefing from UN Special Envoy Martin Griffiths, who apparently has a peace plan. Fantastic. We'll see where that goes. Nowhere, I suspect. They're also going to be talking about the EU global strategy. They're also going to be talking about issues around the Horn of Africa, the Red Sea, and also Jordan. So those are the main features of this meeting. But
this is a fundamental issue, Mike. Look at the issues being raised here. You're talking about wanting countries to basically chip in to a central fund that's really foreign policy related. In other words, if this is the way things are heading, each individual member state will not have an independent foreign policy. And certainly, if you have a collective defense budget, Mike, and you're making collective decisions on deployment, then really, how can any member state have an individual foreign policy?
So you've absolutely hit the nail on the head there, Patrick. Now, what you're referring to is the quote that's on screen, because she's talking about the Africa Trust Fund today and about migration. Migration is the big EU issue aside from defence. And she's saying that the Africa Trust Fund has proved to be useful. It has brought results. This is why we're asking for more money from member states. And you've absolutely hit the nail on the head with this one.
Well, how long is it going to be until this type of, say, soft power moves like this are going to be followed by military deployments, Mike, peacekeeping missions by the EU, unified forces in 5 or 10 years? I don't know how long it's going to take, but no, these are really like profound questions that go to the heart of the issue of national sovereignty or state sovereignty, that decision making of foreign policy and being able to, opt out of things that are happening with the other states. That's kind of important. They do have some degree of this with NATO at the moment, but with EU military unification and complete political foreign policy unification, that's going to be very difficult, Mike, to opt out, especially for the main Northern European states.
Right. So one of the things that, I didn't mention in the defence meetings this morning, of course, one of the things they're going to be discussing is the new relationship between the EU and NATO. And in fact, Jens Stoltenberg will be there taking part in that meeting. So that is a very important point that you raise. Okay, well, let's move on to Syria then. And Patrick, the progress of the Syrian military in the south of the country is moving forward, and people really getting upset about it in some areas.
Well, and anyone who has been following how the Syrian army have been operating, especially look at the operation to liberate eastern Ghouta and the Damascus suburbs, they move very quickly and get results very quickly, especially working with the Russian Air Force. And that's exactly what's happening here, Mike, down in the southern front. And of course, people are upset because it's the same talking points they recycled from Aleppo, and we've seen them in other places. They use this for Ghouta as well. Oh, the civilian death toll, etc. If you look at this article by the International Crisis Group, which is one of the George Soros funded, among other people funding it, but certainly an open society friendly project. And it's a litany of propaganda when you really drill down into how they're framing this. And if you look at Tim Ripley's book, Operation Aleppo, we spoke about this on the Sunday Wire, the Russian military and the Syrian army meticulous about avoiding civilian casualties on a very complex operation to retake East Aleppo. Let's just compare that to the U.S. operation to liberate Mosul. Look at the care and look at the detail and look at the results. The results in Mosul, they covered them up. In Raqqa, they've covered them up. They've downplayed the death tolls in order for the United States and its coalition partners to look good. So here, this is in Syrian territory. This is the Syrian government retaking terrorist-held areas within its own country. And they're going to be very careful about this, but there are a lot of extremist groups down there, and there's calls for coalitions between terrorist groups, most notably al-Nusra's call recently. So it's a very difficult situation, but it's going to be liberated, Mike. Just a question of time.
As we mentioned on the Sunday Wire last night, a lot of the blowback against this from the West is that they are alleging that Syria and Russia, and the pressure is mainly on Russia, are breaching the what was it? Sorry, I've forgotten the term. The de-escalation zone, right?
Yeah.
But Trump apparently not too concerned about that. In fact, he's warning the Free Syrian Army that they're on their own, as it were. So he clearly does not want to get involved in any direct confrontation with Russia or Syria in this.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't go so far as to say he. I don't think Trump will have grasped the intricacies of this problem that to be fair, he's inherited from the last administration that's put the United States in this current position. But yeah, so there's going to be no help and aid. In other words, the white horse isn't coming over the hill for the jihadis. So says the U.S. government. Basically, yes, you're on your own. But these de-escalation zones are a moot point within Syrian territory. Those were organized earlier on in order as an overall effort to try to stabilize large parts of the country as a whole and deal with basically getting militant fighters and terrorists out of areas and repatriating them to Idlib, for instance. Right now, this is an active operation to basically retake a very, very important part of southern Syria, and it's going ahead. It seems like as scheduled. And I'm going to add too, a number of the militant groups have asked to go through the reconciliation process. So this was something that a lot of militants didn't do recently in Ghouta, and they instead took the buses to Idlib, to the sort of second de facto Islamic State, which is where all the terrorist groups, a lot of them have fled to. So,
well, perhaps unsurprisingly, Alistair Burt, the International Development Minister, was speaking today and upset about this moves into southern Syria, deeply concerned about reports of air and artillery attacks by the Assad regime against the de-escalation area in southwest Syria, leading to civilian deaths and displacements in recent days. A military offensive by the regime in this area would constitute a flagrant violation of the ceasefire and de-escalation agreement reached by Russia, the United States and Jordan last November, and which the UK has supported. We urge Russia to uphold its commitments under this agreement and ensure that the Syrian regime abides by the ceasefire. So that's the UK position, which is typical of the nonsense that they put out on these issues.
So this Alistair Burt's basically saying that terrorists have a right to hold territory within a sovereign state, is basically what he's saying.
Absolutely.
That terrorist groups can, once they're hunkered down, according to Alistair Burt, they have rights, basically, under international law. Terrorist groups have rights to sort of occupy militarily, paramilitarily, areas within a sovereign state, a UN member state, is what this British official is basically saying. In other words, Syria, Damascus doesn't have the right to liberate its own territory. And you'll see the same arguments will be coming up in any other remaining pockets, but it's a moot point.
Okay, well, let's sticking with Syria then. The headline on this article is Mideast Christians see Russia, not the US, as defender of their faith.
Very interesting article here, which you can go and visit at this Christian Times website. So and this reflected, we'll talk about Andrew Ashdown in a minute, but this is the reality on the ground in the Middle East. Why is this the reality? Well, quite simply because people, especially people in the Middle East, see the hypocrisy and the complicity in the United States, the UK, and its France, and all the other European, Western European countries, supposedly Christian majority countries, seeing them in their role funding, arming, training extremist terrorists in Syria for the last 7 years. So how could anybody read that as that the U.S., Britain, or France have any of the Christians in the Middle East have any of their best interests at heart? And there's a lot of rhetoric and talk in the United States, especially in the evangelical community, how we want to save the Christians. Literally, they're raising money. People like Glenn Beck are raising millions of dollars in these funds to go and rescue the Christians from ISIS in Iraq. And I don't know where they've managed to take a few of them and dump them in places like Slovenia, I'm not sure, or Albania, I'm not sure exactly where they managed to do that. But so there's people trading off this talking point that the U.S. are there to save the Christians, Mike. But if you look at it, it'd be nice if these same pundits would actually put pressure on their own government, especially even under the 8 years of Obama, to say, why are you arming and funding jihadis in Syria? And these are the people that are ethnically cleansing Christians and Yazidis and other religious and ethnic minorities in Iraq and Syria. So no surprise, really.
Yep. Well, look, you mentioned Andrew Ashdown. Reverend Andrew Ashdown was speaking at Frome Stop Wars event on Friday evening, and he was talking, this was one of the subjects that he was discussing, Patrick. Now, slight technical issue, but straight after this program, if you will ignore the black screen for a couple of seconds when we finish the news program today, I'm going to play out that presentation that he gave on Friday. And it was worth listening to, so he does cover many of these issues.
Excellent.
Now let's move on to the Atlantic Council, because a couple of days ago they were apparently giving out their 2018 Freedom Awards. Atlantic Council linked to NATO.
Yeah, it's NATO, I believe, supported by NATO, but not just NATO, Mike. I believe they probably received funding over the last few years from all the major defense contractors. So this is really, you could say, this is NATO's think tank, basically. Okay,
but one of the recipients of a Freedom Award was Bana Al-Labid.
Bana of Aleppo. She's a Freedom Award winner, 2018, from the NATO think tank Atlantic Council. Stunning interview that she gave, absolutely brilliant in her ability to memorize the lines that were given to her. So she's clearly not reading off a cue card. She's memorized these, or maybe something in the ear.
Yes, but look, let's have a watch of some of this.
Let people decide. What do you think? This is contrived? Do you think this is authentic, or is this poor girl, this poor 8-year-old girl, being put up to basically be a propaganda oracle for the Western powers? You decide.
And is there anything else you want to say to everyone here?
Yes. Thank you, all of you. I'm so happy to be here with all of you today. What happened in Syria is so sad. I will always ask, why didn't the world stop the war in Syria? Many children in Syria have a story of pain, destruction, and sadness. The war is for no child in this world. Who shall bring my memories, my lovely home, my dear friends, my school? They destroyed our childhood. The war is for no child. Many children were killed. Many schools were destroyed. How can the children live like this situation? We couldn't live like that. So I decided to speak our story on Twitter. My mom helped me.
I think we've seen enough to get the point there, Patrick. What have they done here? Is this a form of child abuse, actually? What are they turning this little girl into? We've seen what happens to Hollywood child stars when they are brought up from this age to perform in this way. What kind of future do you think she has?
Well, you can train a dolphin to do tricks and perform for the crowds, and people pay money to see that. What they're doing here is training this girl, either feeding her lines through the earpiece, hence the hair over the ear, I don't know, or she's memorized them, but those aren't lines that an 8-year-old child would contrive, so they're creating a fake persona. And they've been doing this on Twitter from day one with this poor kid. And they're going to wring her out until there's not a drop left in this kid, I'm telling you, and who knows what's going to happen to her when they're done with her. But how long can you keep this fake facade up? And I know she's already done the book tour with J.K. Rowling. Millions and millions of dollars have been minted off the back of this poor kid. Okay, and there's just no end to the propaganda that they're trying to sort of use her to advance, and it's something else to see.
So she's been given this Freedom Award, but she was in illustrious company, Patrick, because, former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright also receiving a Freedom Award.
Well, look at that. Right side by side with Madeleine Albright. Interesting. That's the same Madeleine Albright that was asked, what do you think about the half a million Iraqi children that died as a result of punitive U.S. sanctions and the ensuing conflict? And was it worth it? And she said, yes, it was worth it. So there's Madeleine Albright, Freedom Award, next to a little propaganda mascot, unfortunately.
Well, somebody had it right, Sophia.
Yeah, so she's from the blog Les Politiques, excellent French politics blog, and she's saying somewhere in an alternative reality universe, 8-year-old Bana, a human rights activist linked to the Western branch of Syrian Al-Qaeda and the White Helmets, appears alongside Miss Albright, and that was Miss Albright. It was worth it to kill 500,000 Iraqi children. Freedom Award. So this is the times we live in.
Well, yes. Now, we've done plenty of criticism of the mainstream media recently, deservedly so. But do we get a chance to say that Al Jazeera has done a reasonable job in this case?
This is a pretty good report, which has been done by Al Jazeera recently. And
so the headline is An Unworthy War, US-UK Reporting on Yemen, and you can find it on YouTube. Yeah,
you can. And this is threatening to be an excellent piece of journalism by Al Jazeera. And this, but mind you, this is difficult for Al Jazeera because they even criticized or even highlighted Qatar's role. They said, we are funded by the Qatari state, but Qatar's role in supporting the White Helmets, for instance. But more surprisingly, if you go back to that slide, they actually gave 21st Century Wire a little bit of airtime in the middle of all that, which is an article by Vanessa Beeley there, The White Helmets, Humanitarians, and the Modern Bomb Factory in Sakba, Eastern Ghouta, which was published not long ago, May 23rd of 2018. So the fact they gave us a look in, Mike, I was shocked. But it's an excellent piece that features Piers Robinson, professor of Sheffield University, and also one of the members of the working group on Syria propaganda and media. So it's an excellent piece. It really is going over Yemen and presenting the White Helmets issue in an objective as a way as can be done. And I'm almost impressed.
Okay, let's move. Now, last Monday when you were on the program, Patrick, we were discussing the possibility of a Trump-Putin summit, and you made the outrageous claim that it was not going to happen in the White House, and it certainly wasn't going to happen in Moscow, and it turns out that you were absolutely correct. Because TASS reporting here that Austria is gearing up to host this meeting on the 15th of July. So they're saying that this is according to to Austrian media. They're saying that according to their sources, several days ago, diplomatic representatives from Washington and Moscow arrived in Vienna to discuss in detail holding this bilateral summit between Russia and the United States, and that senior security officials from both countries have also arrived there to prepare for the meeting. Now, at the moment, everybody being, aside from the Austrians who are saying this is going on, the Russians and the Americans being slightly tight-lipped about it. This is Dmitry Peskov, who's the presidential spokesman, saying we're not ready to provide this information. We will inform you as soon as we're ready. But the next thing is that of course, Mike Pompeo over the weekend was discussing this because John Bolton should be in Moscow by today. He was heading over there yesterday or today, and he would be meeting with his counterpart. This is what Pompeo was saying, and I think it's likely President Trump will be meeting with his counterpart, which is obviously Putin, in the not too distant future, following the Bolton meeting in Moscow today. So this is what Pompeo was saying to MSNBC on Friday. And he said where the two nations have shared interests, they should be working together. He said they appreciate that there's problems between the two countries, but where they have shared interests, they should be cooperating. So it's looking very, very likely that this is going to happen on the 15th of July, while Trump is in Europe. Now, of course, he's supposed to be popping into the UK on the 13th, but we'll wait and see whether he actually does that. And whether he survives the experience.
Unless something happens before the 15th, Mike, some incident that's going to spark international outrage, and how dare Trump go and meet Putin at a moment like this? How many times have we seen this happen recently? So I'm afraid to say that something could happen, because when those two are photographed together and they're actually talking and meeting, that's going to send the U.S. press into a complete state of
apoplexy.
Apoplexy.
Yeah.
I mean, just total hysteria and irrationality, and it's like the apocalypse beckons on July 15th in Austria.
Well, indeed, because apparently God is booing Trump.
Well, this is well, here's Maxine Waters. Okay, so she's the leader of the resistance in the United States. This is one of the Democratic Party's leading caricatures right now, and she's saying God is on our side, and she's calling on all restaurants and gas stations to anybody from the Trump administration to go and intimidate and harass them. Basically, they're saying boo them, but it's bordering on physical intimidation.
So this is coming out of this video that appeared last week of I can't remember which Trump administration.
Department of Homeland Security, one of the heads of the Department of Homeland Security, secretary actually, was confronted in a restaurant by these members of the resistance. And so what I can say is when the Democrats are invoking God, that's the last mile right there. So this is officially a jihad for the resistance. So I think this is kind of scary, actually, when they start, throwing in religious overtones on the new left. That's pretty scary, actually. What's going to happen next?
Okay, just a quick reminder that Alternative View 9 DVDs are available on the UK Column website. They're also available on 21st Century Wire, and only 1 week to go before the price goes up. They will ship next Monday, so get yours while you can. Now, the Israeli press really pretty excited at the moment because the British royal family apparently has broken its unstated but obvious unwillingness to go and visit Israel. So Prince William is beginning a historic tour of the Middle East, according to BICOM, because he's going to be visiting Israel. He's going to be meeting President Netanyahu, and away he goes. But Prince William in Israel, says Haaretz, all the details of the first ever royal visit. They're really getting excited about it. But unfortunately for Haaretz, they also had to announce this. Israeli army opens fire on youths in southern Gaza Strip. Now, they're making a big deal of the fact that Prince William will meet Netanyahu, but he'll also meet representatives from the Palestinian Authority, as if that equals things out. The fact is, Patrick, is it not, that this meeting, this visit is coming at exactly the wrong time, because what Israel will take out of this is that the British royal family, the British establishment, absolutely supports their actions against the Palestinians in recent weeks and months. They're going to take quite a boost out of that.
Absolutely.
And really any attempt to sort of normalize things by having Prince William meeting the Palestinians. That's really not going to achieve anything.
And what if Mike? What if next month in July, Israel mounts an offensive in Gaza, a ground offensive and air offensive, much like what we saw in 2014? What if that unfolds? And it's very likely that this might actually happen. If you look at the statements recently by Netanyahu and other Israeli officials, more and more vociferous, more and more aggressive. So this would be seen as an endorsement by the British. I think you're right.
Now, the Russian embassy was tweeting about the World Cup today. They were putting out a piece of video. You can go to the Twitter feed for the Russian embassy UK and see the video that they're pushing out. Really, what they've said is don't unfurl England flags, they said. Russian hooligans take no chances, they said. Reality check, and they were showing a video with everybody getting on very well. There has been no trouble at this event between Russian and British fans so far, with the exception of 3 that have apparently been arrested for pretty poor behaviour. Why am I mentioning this? Well, mainly because this is a comment about the mainstream media, because Sky News pushed this article out today. The World Cup is peaceful. Where is everyone? Now, at first glance, it seems that what they're saying is there's nobody there. Of course, that's not the case. There are lots of people there. But what this article is quite a positive article about one journalist's experience visiting the World Cup. And she's basically saying, I'm here, and all the people that are saying that there's all this other stuff likely to happen aren't. So why don't you get over here and actually enjoy this situation? Russia is putting on a pretty good show, is what she's saying. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to say well done for what appears to be a reasonably balanced report, which, this is what the Russians have been saying the whole time.
Yeah, it's a decent report, Mike, but, as you also pointed out, you look at the headline, look at the photo, the subliminal message there is that nobody actually came to the World Cup. Of course, that would be wrong. All the games are sellouts as far as we could see. But so a good job, but not such a good job. But go back 2 slides with the England fan. I just want to point out something. Now, I'm looking in the background, Mike, and I'm looking at that flag in the background. What fighter is that flying there on the England flag?
Well, that's a Hurricane.
It's a Hurricane. So if this was a Russian flag that had Soviet fighters, or if this was a Syrian football supporter with the Syrian Air Force, how would that be viewed by the Western press? Would they call that nationalist? Would they call that fascist, maybe? Something like, or if there's an Italian flag with Mussolini's Air Force flying behind. But it just, people don't take any notice at all. But the use of World War II imagery, mixing it with sports is pretty incredible when you look at it, but notice our press just don't notice any of that, really. But if another country does it, it's this nationalism and demagoguery. Yeah.
Well, certainly Russia isn't criticizing Britain for that.
No,
I think
not
that's
at
quite
all.
an interesting
Not at all.
observation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, just briefly, David Lidington, who's of course Minister for the Cabinet Office, one of the most powerful men in the country, is talking today at a think tank all about outsourcing. Now, of course, the government's outsourcing model in tatters following the Carillion collapse, and also the other sort of outsourcing companies that are running up against problems, Capita being an example of that. So he's giving a speech today basically saying what a great thing outsourcing is. They are determined to press ahead with it. They're determined to build a society, he says, where people can access the best public services, and the only way to provide those best public services is through these outsourcing companies. So the government going to support them in every way possible. He said, and whether it's operating our call centres, building our railways, or delivering our school meals, the private sector has a vital role to play in delivering public services, something the government will never cease to champion. So why are they championing this? Well, 2 reasons. First of all, of course, is that this is part and parcel of the privatisation agenda that they have. The other reason is because they think that they can get away with refusing freedom of information requests on the back of outsourcing, on the basis that there are commercial arrangements in place there, and that there's an exemption within the Freedom of Information Act for these types of commercial arrangements, so they can hide all kinds of ills behind these types of arrangements. But what I'll just mention is that if anybody is running up against that type of problem, where they're asking freedom of information questions and they're not getting answers on this basis, well, in fact, the Information Commissioner's Office has already ruled on this. And the rule is that where a private company is providing a service which had previously or would otherwise be provided by a public body, that in fact they are still required to answer the questions under the Freedom of Information Act. So don't be put off by that. Keep going at it.
That's an accountability and transparency. That's a huge issue.
Yes.
With public services, but there's also a cost as well. And look at the rail system. Look at some of these other formerly public services. Look at what they cost now. That's not what they were being sold as when they privatized them. It was, oh, we're going to save money and let market forces take care of it. Of course, that might be true in theory, but in the reality of crony capitalism, that's not what happened.
No.
So we're paying, how much is it to get a train from London to Bristol?
Well, from London to Plymouth, it's about £150, isn't it?
Yeah.
Unless you order it 6 months in advance, order your ticket. Let's just briefly discuss Brexit, because there was apparently a huge demonstration taking place over the weekend, and The Guardian here saying pro-Corbyn group to launch drive for public vote on the Brexit deal. So this is more attempts to break up and get division amongst everybody, because the pro-Corbyn group is going to launch a drive. This doesn't mean that Corbyn's going to launch the drive. Mm-hmm. And in fact, your observation was that he had been quite clever about getting out of the country in time for this demonstration.
Oh, he was brilliant. So, well, a couple of days ago, the big EU rally, you had some major Labour figures there. Where was Corbyn, Mike? He was in Jordan at a refugee camp. So no one can really wag the finger and say anything bad about being there with the refugees and Syrian refugees in Jordan. So very adept political maneuver by Jeremy Corbyn. I was kind of almost impressed with that. He also avoided criticism because he wasn't asked to comment on it either, because he was completely out of the country. Yeah. So great move by Corbyn. Okay, so we've got these moves on the Labour side, these pro-Corbynistas apparently who want a second referendum, or at least a vote on the final deal. On the Tory side, we've got the same thing. More than 50 Tory MPs prepared to defy Theresa May to stop no-deal Brexit, according to The Independent, and we've got to have another vote. And you can see the first sort of headline on the video clip on the Independent article is, "Can Brexit be reversed?" So they absolutely everybody, each side, determined to have a faction which is going to push for a vote come the final deal, if not a full second referendum. Well, Brexit continues to be a fraud because, of course, while all this rubbish is going on, there's no progress in the actual negotiations, as it were, because it takes longer for Theresa May to get her white paper out, her position public. When her position does become public in the next couple of weeks, when the white paper comes out, this is going to be amplified, this kind of division. And, well... But it needs a catalyst. To really make this division work and to really create a proper fracture, you need a catalyzing event. What's it going to be? You need something, Mike, that's going to create an imperative for the establishment to push for the second referendum, and for the press to basically take the opportunity to really hype that up. What's it going to be, Mike? Is it going to be Northern Ireland and Ireland? Is it going to be a border issue? What do this is the question. The white paper that she's going to publish in the next couple of weeks, it was supposed to be published before the big European Council meeting, which is coming up soon. It isn't going to happen in time for that. In a couple of weeks after that, it's going to be published. And when that comes, we will, allegedly, she claims, we will understand what her position is on all these issues. And that is going to be a red rag to a bull to somebody. It's no matter what position she takes, because there's such divisiveness within the parties, which is being driven by the mainstream media. It's encouraging divisiveness within the British population. Whatever she publishes in that white paper is going to be a red rag to a bull to somebody,
and it's going to kick off at that point.
And when is the date, the likely release of that paper?
Well, she hasn't specified an exact date. It was supposed to be in time for the European Council meeting, which is happening next week or the week after. She's saying within a week or two of that. So certainly within the next 3 to 4 weeks.
So put that on your calendar, folks. That's when you might see something interesting happen in the news that's going to trigger this discussion or uproar for a second referendum. We'll see.
Okay, now, Patrick, over the last week or two in the British press, we've seen this huge drive with comments from, I think it was Michael Gove, about the use of medical marijuana and that it should be legalised and so on. The government saying that they don't quite go that far, but certainly there's a discussion happening all of a sudden in this country on that issue. But you've got Health and Fitness here saying, shocking news, Big Pharma stands to lose $18.5 billion if all 50 states in the United States legalise medical marijuana. So we've got, once again, a sort of major policy being discussed at the same time in both sides of the Atlantic. Just a coincidence?
That's true. The flip side of this Health and Fitness article is that Big Pharma stands to lose $18 billion, but they also stand to make an absolute fortune on the legalization of marijuana. And you have to ask yourself, say, who has been behind the push to legalize marijuana? Who's been pumping millions of dollars globally in different countries, especially in Uruguay, which is one of the only countries recently, I think Canada's just come online, but Uruguay, to sort of decriminalize and, I'm not sure what the proper legal term is, but legalize or decriminalize and make it okay for the commercial industry of marijuana. But Uruguay, so George Soros was at the forefront of that. George Soros was. He's also a big, I'm told and I've read, he's a big shareholder in Monsanto. And so we warned about this back in 2014, 21st Century Wires, George Soros and the GMO cannabis revolution. So if you read between the lines and you look at companies like Merck, okay, companies like Bayer, who are able to sort of develop and patent GMO strains of cannabis and then monopolize the market. And you look at what they've done to other sections of the agricultural industry, patenting seeds, patenting everyday vegetables, corn, and then suing natural growers for infringing on their patents when their seeds, natural seeds, have blown into the GMO crop area. This is what you're going to see with regards to cannabis. So GMO cannabis. So what happens when they breed all the natural strains out and all you've got is GMO in terms of cannabis? That could be the future. But there's George Soros right behind it.
But Russia Today making the point that Russia is particularly concerned about Canada's marijuana legislation, and they're even suggesting that it undermines international law.
Sure. So this is the other side of the legalization debate that people need to consider. So what Russia's problem is that there are a number of international conventions and treaties signed. 1961, the Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs. 1971, the Convention on Psychotropic Substances. 1988, the UN Convention on Illicit Traffic of Narcotics and Drugs and Psychotropic Substances as well, all of which Canada endorsed, all of those agreements. So Russia's saying, hey, you've endorsed all these agreements, and there wasn't any line items in there regarding exceptions or being flexible in the interpretation of this in terms of entertainment substances, which is what Canada has kind of framed this issue as. So Moscow's saying, well, do we not have an agreement or not? And where does Canada stand? Where does the G7 stand on the arbitrary nature of this stance? Because the problem is, if one country is legalized pot production or any drug production and the neighboring countries haven't, then you have a supply issue as well and a sales issue of the market becoming flooded with whatever psychedelic strain of skunk weed that's being developed in Vancouver, British Columbia, and that's flooding the market in Russia or another country. So this becomes a real issue, and this is why these treaties and these agreements were signed years ago. Now there's many arguments for the legalization of drugs and marijuana, and many of those are legitimate arguments as well. But you still have to deal with this in the international setup. You still have to mediate these problems. These are real issues.
And clearly the commercialization and the potential for GMO intervention here. This is a particularly concerning aspect of it.
It is, and it actually should be a concern for people who are advocates and proponents of cannabis, whether it's medical or whether it's recreational, to at least have some say in whether you're going to have a natural version available to you, or is the market going to be completely controlled by lobbyists from all these big pharma companies, and so all you've got is the GMO version, which who knows what that's going to be like. So engineered for what?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Patrick, for joining me today. We're going to have to leave it there. We're out of time. Thank you for joining us today. We will be back at the same time, 1 p.m. tomorrow, and we hope to see you then. Bye-bye.